Welcome to Altitude Advantage, another episode here following week 2. We are heading into week 3. I'm your team reporter, Elisa Hernandez, with our lead writer, Aric DiLalla.
That was nice.
You know, but not you interrupting my intro. Anyways, we're going to talk about this weekend. We're going to talk about what Sean Payton had to say, not only post-game, but as well as the press conference from this morning. So we have a lot to dive into. So I noticed that you tend to kind of digest the game, and then the next day you digest it again. So what are your kind of key takeaways the second time around following yesterday's game?
Yeah, and I appreciate everybody listening in. Let us know if you liked kind of what we did yesterday, which was me just talking for 20 minutes. My kind of, like you said, initial reaction to the game, the initial thoughts still there right after the game ended. I think that's something, as I mentioned yesterday, we'll try to do probably after home games, a little trickier on the road just based on the timing. You've got to get to your we've got to get up in the air. We got to fly back to Denver.
Yeah.
So a little trickier on the road, but home games we hope to bring that sort of instant analysis. And like you mentioned, Elisa, this gives us a chance to kind of digest the game a little bit more, sleep on it a little bit. I think what Sean Payton says a lot, and he said this again on Monday, and we'll get to kind of everything that he said, but it's not ever quite as bad as you think it was. Mm-hmm. It's not ever quite as good as you think it was. And I came in Monday morning and watched the game back, and I think there were some encouraging aspects, especially about Bo Nix's play, especially about what some of the receivers were able to do late in the game. But looking back at the Broncos' 13-6 loss to the Steelers, I think a few things. One, offensively, obviously, it's got to be better, right? And Sean Payton said that right after the game. You've got to find a way to score more points, got to get into the end zone. That's just kind of the reality of the NFL. You're not going to win a lot of football games scoring 6 points. I think everybody knows that.
Yeah.
I thought as the game went along, the Broncos got more comfortable, and there was some talk, I think, online of, Bo Nix completed a lot of his passes late against a prevent defense. No, he didn't. It's just not true. I mean, I understand, like, maybe that last drive there was an element of that, but certainly there were 2 other drives, and I know the trick play to Josh Reynolds got a lot of the attention. It was very cool.
Right.
Up in the press box, I was like, whoa, excitement, fun. But the throw right before that on 3rd and 7, the 20-something yard dagger to Cortland Sutton, 26 yards, which I believe right before that trick play was the longest play of the season for the Broncos. That's just a good throw.
Yeah.
Where he steps up in the pocket. I think you saw him get more comfortable. There were some times where he was, he moved out of the pocket maybe a little early, didn't step up. But that was one of the throws where you think that's an NFL throw. That's what you need your starting quarterback to do. And so I was impressed by that. You then have the deep one to Josh Reynolds. And then, unfortunately, you have the interception. Let's get back to that in just a second. Yeah. But I think if you go then to the drive with about 10 minutes left, Bo Nix, a short pass to Javonte Williams, then a 4th and 6. The Steelers, who don't bring a lot of pressure, they brought pressure on that play. He finds Josh Reynolds on that kind of hot route. Yeah. And at least if you look back to a week ago in Seattle, there were a couple times where they brought pressure where he didn't have that plan, or he didn't know exactly where. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe he didn't not know, but it just didn't work out where either the receiver wasn't ready or he wasn't looking right there. Yeah. I thought that was like a sign of clear, tangible progress. They bring pressure. He knows where to go. Boom, 22-yard completion. You're down to the Pittsburgh 20-yard line. Like, that's where I saw progress from Bo.
Yeah.
And so I thought there were some encouraging signs, but offensively you still need to find a way to convert. Obviously, just mentioned it, that red zone interception there. Sean Payton mentioned that there was an error with the route. Watching it back, and I said this kind of last night, I'm not sure that was Cortland, or if it was, as it was mentioned on the broadcast, maybe somebody else was supposed to run a different type of route to get that corner to be away from Court there. So not assigning blame to a particular receiver there, but Sean Payton did say there were some dirty hands, some messy hands on that play. I wonder, Elise, and I'm interested in your thoughts here, if like you talk about offense, right? And everything that needs to go right for an offensive play to work, push the ball down the field in particular. And I kind of feel like the red zone, you talk about the NFL being faster, right, than college football.
Yeah.
Well, the red zone is faster than any other area of the field. And so I wonder if, the Broncos, I think, are now 1 of 7 in the red zone. If they were 0 of 3 yesterday, I believe 1 of 4 against Seattle. I'm not a math major. I was not a math major, but I think 1 of 7 is what that adds up to.
Yeah.
But I just wonder if like maybe that's the last thing to click, right? Because you're seeing a little bit of progress in the middle of the field, I thought. I thought Bo was much more accurate, didn't sail the number of passes that he did. That going back to that dagger throw, and I know I'm just kind of rambling about Bo here to start, but like.
But I mean, that's the focus, right? Like that's what people want to see, like the key takeaways from that. Because, and one thing that I thought was funny, but I also he's not letting the pressure get to him in the sense, because even after the game, they asked him about that interception. He's like, took a step back and threw it to the other team. Like it was such a direct answer. And I don't think he meant it like in a smart kind of response. I think he meant it like, I acknowledge, like I know what I did. And it's like, I can see him playing the play in his head, right? And a lot of the guys, Quinn Miners in particular, said after the game, like he's really proud of Bo and the way that he's still going to command the offense. And he's still going in to try to tell the guys what to do. And that's hard. He's a rookie, and it's hard to do that. You're talking to veterans, you're talking to guys that have been in the league for a long time, and you're going into trying to find a spark and trying to get a rhythm. And, he had his tight end. He did acknowledge Greg Dulcich. I think it says, make sure I say his name right.
Dulcich.
Don't come for me. I promise I'll get it right. you should see how long it took me to get Eric's last name right. Anyways, after the game, he acknowledged straight out,
my wife can't even say my last name right, so don't worry about it.
Okay. That makes me feel a lot better. But for him, he acknowledged right in post game, I dropped 2 passes. I dropped 2 key passes, and that's unacceptable. I can't happen. And when you have those kind of answers from your star quarterback, from your tight end, that is just straight accountability. It's not, I wasn't sure. No, I dropped them. Period. Like there's no ambiguity there. And I think when you have that from all sides, I think that's what you were able to start building on, especially as you said, you're going into week 3.
Yeah. And those drops, and again, more to come here in a little bit on like what Sean Payton said Monday as he looked at the film. I think we want to start again, looking at this game. You mentioned some drops there. Mm-hmm. But I just wonder again, like, is the red zone, I don't want to say the last thing to click, but does it just take a little bit more time? Obviously, last year the Broncos had a veteran quarterback, and it was a struggle in the red zone, especially goal to go. It wasn't good enough, as Sean Payton has said many times now over the course of the offseason and preseason. And so I just wonder, and maybe we'll get a chance to hear from Sean Payton about that at some point here, just like, is red zone the last thing to fall into place? Because if you're the Broncos, 3 red zone opportunities yesterday against the Steelers, when the other team scores 13 points, if you can score a pair of touchdowns and a field goal, boom, you're in good shape. Yeah. And granted, maybe the Steelers change a little bit of how they play. I think that's always a caveat worth mentioning when you are in these types of games where, the Broncos are down 10 points or they're down 7 points late. Like the Steelers don't have a need to play as aggressively maybe as they would if they're trailing. But all that said, I think that there were opportunities. And all 3 of those drives, and I just want to look at this. I got the game book in front of me here. Mm-hmm. All 3 of those drives, Elisa, that ended up in Pittsburgh territory.
Yeah.
They were significant drives. I mean,
break it down, math major.
Yes. Third quarter, the first one, which is where the goal line, the red zone interception happened.
Yeah.
Broncos start at their own 15-yard line. So they move 79 yards. The next one, own 30-yard line, move 54 yards down to the Pittsburgh 16 is where the last play was snapped.
Okay.
Last drive, barring that, like with 9 seconds left when they get the ball back, Denver 20, almost 70 yards, 4 first downs, get down to the Pittsburgh 11. When you look at last week in Seattle, and I don't have that game book in front of me, but 2 of those possessions, right, started in the red zone.
Yeah.
And so there were fewer drives where you had long sustained drives. And so I actually, even though the point total was 14 points lower than it was against Seattle, I could almost make the argument that there were more and better sustained drives against Pittsburgh than there were against Seattle. And that's the sort of progress I think that you like to see. Again, it goes back to that. It's not always as bad as it looks when you're watching it. It's not ever as good as it looks when you're watching it.
Yeah.
But certainly the Broncos need to find a way to convert when they're down there. We'll talk a lot more about week 3 and the challenge that the undefeated Tampa Bay Buccaneers create and present. But you've got to be able to convert down in the red zone.
Yeah, well, to your point, like just looking at the receiving numbers, Josh Reynolds, 4 receptions, 93 yards, his longest 49. Lil Jordan Humphreys, 4 receptions, 50 yards, his long of 27. Javonte Williams, 5 receptions, long of 14. Cortland Sutton, 1 reception, 26 yards. So, you see those numbers, like those plays are happening, right? It's kind of stringing them together and capitalizing in the red zone, which I think, because if you look at Bo compared to Justin Fields was 13 of 20, 117 yards. He did have the touchdown. Bo Nix was 20 of 35, 246 yards. And unfortunately, the 2 interceptions, one that came obviously late in the game. And, you're kind of confident about these numbers. As you said, he said at postgame, progress doesn't always come in wins, right? And he did mention that he does feel like he's gotten better in certain things from week 1 to week 2. Obviously, again, like everyone was disappointed in the home loss. Everyone in the locker room was disappointed in the home loss. But I think they're kind of taking the challenge. It's like, okay, like we're so close, and the defense, some defense players were saying, we thought we were going to have them score less, And so although there is talk of like 13 points should be enough, the defense has a higher standard for themselves to be like, we actually wanted to keep Pittsburgh lower than that.
Yep.
And not because they don't think that their offense can't score or anything like that, but they're just like, we're capable of keeping teams lower than that. And I think that was a really big kind of takeaway from the defense that they were able to kind of prove on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, it really was, you mentioned being close. It was a tale of 2 halves. I mean, the Broncos in the first half, 62 total yards. Steelers had 189. In the second half, the Steelers had basically 60 total yards. I think, I'm looking at this just to make sure that I don't have it wrong yet. I believe 9 net passing yards, or gross passing yards, excuse me.
Yeah. Looking at the stats right now.
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure. Oh, sorry, 16. I don't want to short him there, but 16 net passing yards in the second half for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then you look at the Broncos offensively, 230 yards in the second half, and some of that came on that final drive. I get that.
Yeah.
But still a much better performance in the second half. I think it's encouraging when you see that sort of progress. You got to find a way to do it the whole game. Yeah. I think your point of stringing plays together is important, right? Because there were a couple times where, I think it was in the third quarter where Josh Reynolds makes a great individual play. You get to 3rd and 1. Right. It feels like, hey, we're going to get a chance to get a first down, get this drive going, because so often it comes down to, can you get this first down, right? Really get the drive going, get into another set of plays, give your defense another couple minutes of rest, and boom, the safety, Deshaun Elliott, blitzes free, is untouched, hits Javonte Williams in the backfield for a loss of 4.
Yeah.
Nothing Javonte Williams can do there.
Yeah.
I know there's some consternation about his yardage totals. We'll get to the run game in a second, but that's a positive play to Josh Reynolds. You're looking at a 3rd and 1, and then boom, 4-yard loss. You got to punt it away, and so that's the sort of thing. Or, next drive, you've got or not the next drive, but other times in the game, there's a play where Bo had a nice throw to Cortland Sutton, I believe. Boom, it's knocked out due to an illegal formation penalty on Garrett Bowles. And so that's where the Broncos have to be better, where you've got to find a way to stack these plays, or even if you're not stacking them, just avoid the negative plays.
Yeah.
And that's, the deep play to Josh Reynolds and then an interception.
Yeah.
So it's not on one player in particular. You mentioned Greg Dulcich, like Broncos get a positive play, then there's a drop. And you just feel like
the momentum. Like momentum was a big topic in week 1, and the guys really kind of focusing like it's that constant shift of momentum and constantly trying to get it back. Now, I think that there were times where they got it back a little more quickly this week.
I agree.
Than last week. But I think they acknowledged, like, we're trying to find a rhythm. We're trying to get our defense set. We're trying to get our offense set. Or the offense was trying to stay out there longer to give their defensive rest. I mean, I think it's not progress that fans are immediately going to appreciate or fans are immediately going to see. But I do think it's worth acknowledging, like, that progress was made from week 1 to week 2.
Yeah, and I think that Sean Payton said it well on Monday. They're getting in their own way at times, whether it's the penalties, whether it's the drops. And so they've got to find a way to be better there. I mentioned...
Oh, speaking of penalties, I had to look that up. Trying to pay attention to this math class that we have going. For penalties, the Steelers had 10 penalties for 78 yards. The Broncos had 9 penalties for 124 yards.
Yeah, and granted, a couple of those came on downfield pass interference penalties, and so you're going to get kind of inflated yardage numbers. Obviously, there's the one on Riley Moss. There's the one on Pat Surtain working against Pickens there. I think you could debate some of those, like, were they to the point of being pass interference?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think you have to adjust as a defense to the referee crew kind of as you're going, and you got to figure that out. And you can't just say, I'm going to continue to play as physical and just expect that those flags are going to stop. So there's a little bit of that. But
the Steelers got 5 first downs off of penalties.
Yeah.
Alone.
And even, like, I think back to the PJ Locke unnecessary roughness call, which they said on the broadcast, it wasn't a dirty hit by any means, but they still have to call it from a safety standpoint. And obviously that didn't lead to points for the Steelers, but it did take off another couple of minutes off the game clock, which at that point was significant. So you're right, penalties got to get cleaned up. We'll still get to the run game here in a second, because I think what Sean Payton said both on Sunday and Monday were interesting. But I do want to talk for a second about usage and personnel groupings. I know it's not like exciting or sexy necessarily, but there's a lot of, you always see fans on Twitter like, why isn't Tyler Beatty getting more carries, or why isn't Marvin Mims getting more targets, or why isn't Troy Franklin getting more targets? And I get that, and I think that, as Sean Payton said, both Sunday and Monday, like, they look at that sort of thing. He mentioned that there's some plays for Tyler Beatty that were either situational or in the red zone, and the Broncos just didn't get to a point where they were able to use them. So that's part of it. And then there's the element, like, when it comes to Mims and Franklin, because Mims, I think, had like 9 snaps, I believe. It could have been 7. It was around that total. It was not a lot of snaps for him. Sean Payton said Monday, you can get to the point where when you are trying to run guys in and out so much and make sure that you're utilizing everybody, it can almost hurt you. I think he said when you're trying to feed everybody, it can end up getting, I want to make sure that I quote him correctly here. Okay. You get into trying to feed too many mouths and then no one eats. We want everybody to eat, right?
Okay.
We want everybody to eat.
With the bars?
No. It makes you think. And so that's interesting as this team moves forward. Like, how do they, because you still want Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin and to get involved, right? But how do you make sure that you're not hurting your offense? And that's what Sean Payton said Sunday night was, we've got all these different personnel groupings, and right now I'm not sure that it's doing what we want it to do. And so do we need to simplify a little bit in terms of, hey, let's just get these guys on the field and let them roll?
Yeah. Like, let them do what they do.
Yeah. Or he, one of the things he said Monday was, we've got a lot of concepts right now that are based on guys winning one-on-one matchups, especially it seemed like at the receiver position. Do we need to do more where we're finding different ways to get guys in space and giving Bo Nix a chance to find some open guys? And I think that is what you want to hear if you're a fan.
Yeah.
is Sean Payton kind of looking inward and saying, okay, what can we do better? What can we adjust? It's not just going to be, we're going to do this no matter what, and we're going to make it work this way. Mm-hmm. It's looking for ways to adjust and make things happen and find more success on the offensive side of the ball. Because clearly, and he said, listen, I went and talked to the offensive coaches. It's on us. This can't be the standard. It's got to be better. So I know people are freaking out a little bit because the team is 0-2.
Well, look, hold on. Like, quick pause there. But there are a couple of good teams that are 0-2 right now. Like, if you think about, like, the Bengals are 0-2, the Colts are 0-2, the Rams are 0-2, the Ravens are 0-2, and I believe the Titans are 0-2. The other ones, I can kind of see why they're 0-2, but we're just kidding. Those teams being the Jaguars and the Panthers. So there's a few teams. There's 9 teams that are 0-2 right now, right? And Pat Surtain after the game yesterday was like, "This is the NFL. This is not. It's not a give me a win league. You have to earn these wins, and you win some, you lose some. But they feel that they do have the player personnel in this building to win a lot of games." And Courtland Sutton said that as well. He spoke in postgame and he said, "I just got done talking to the guys and I told them, like, I've been on opposite sides of this spectrum. I've been on the side where we have a hot start and then we cool off. I've been on the side where we've started very slow and then we go on a run. Like, there's always time to turn it around."
Yeah, I agree with that. I think obviously it's tough to start 0-2 just based on the division you're in. Like, you still got 2 games against the Chiefs. You got a game against the Ravens.
Yeah.
But you're right in that if you put things together, can beat anybody. And the Broncos beat the Chiefs at home last year. They went on the road and beat the Bills. Last year they beat a good Vikings team at home. I mean, you're right that it is possible to turn things around. I think you've just got to have – there's this interesting balance of and people said it all offseason, of wanting to win now and also like being prepared for the future. And I think part of this is just you've got to kind of be okay with incremental progress, especially at the quarterback position. And I know that it's kind of wild to me that there are already people jumping off the Bo, I don't know if you want to call it bandwagon or whatever, but like it's been 2 games. I do think he showed significant progress from week 1 to week 2. Then you look around the league at the other rookies. No rookie quarterback has thrown a touchdown pass yet. Caleb Williams facing a good Texans defense, no doubt about that. He threw 2 picks last night on Sunday Night Football. He was sacked 7 times. There's been a lot of talk about Bo Nix's performance on passes of at least 10 air yards and how that hasn't been kind of where you want it to be. Caleb Williams is in the exact same boat.
Number 1 overall pick.
And listen, that's not a shot at Caleb by any means. He's obviously a super talented player. I'm sure he's your
he's a USC guy, so I'm a defend him to a certain extent. But to your point, I mean, CJ Stroud after the game when he went to go talk to Caleb said, "Don't get discouraged. You were taken number 1 for a reason. Like, just remember that." And like CJ Stroud, it was
but he started 0-2 last year.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like there is this growing pains of, again, wanting to win now, wanting to get success now, because you see these pockets of teams that go on a run, then you're like, oh wait, well, why aren't we doing that? And you're always the NFL. I mean, look at the Raiders last week. They lost to the Chargers. And then they're on the road in Baltimore, and you're thinking like, oh, obviously we're not gonna go too deep into that, but the fact that they went on the road and beat the Ravens, and so there's always a turning point that you can hit, and I think with this team, obviously, they faced 2 very strong defenses in week 1 and week 2 for a rookie quarterback, and you're keeping the games close, you're keeping them within striking distance. I know, again, we're not in the business of moral victories, but that does count for something.
Yeah, and this is about as tough of a start defensively as you can draw up for Bo. I think there's no doubt about that. You go from a Mike McDonald defense in Seattle, one of the loudest environments in the NFL, in your first start, there's some nerves that come with that. And then you play a Pittsburgh defense that doesn't have to blitz because they can get home with guys like TJ Watt and Cam Hayward and, Alex Highsmith. I mean, they've got some dudes over there. And then in the back end, you've got Minkah Fitzpatrick and you've got Patrick Queen.
They have a squad on defense.
That's a good defensive football team. And granted, it doesn't stop, right? Like Todd Bowles' defense that you're going to see this week in Tampa is really good too. And then you see a Jets team that has some playmakers as well. So it's going to continue to be a battle, but I think that offensively, if you can just make some minor tweaks here or there, like Lil Jordan Humphrey this week made plays. You catch the ball, and then you have a run after the catch. That's a big deal compared to what the Broncos did in week 1 in Seattle. Josh Reynolds has the most yards of any Broncos receiver since, I think, week 3, I believe, of last year, when Cortland Sutton had that yardage output. I mean, it's been a while since the Broncos have seen guys post that yardage total.
Yeah.
When you have guys make those plays, that's going to help you get closer to what you need. And then when you get those red zone opportunities, can somebody find a way to make a play? I do think, as we've talked about, and maybe this is kind of a way to offensively at least transition into what Sean Payton was talking about Monday, there's still got to be more from the run game. And when Sean Payton said he looks at the film, there's some things he's encouraged by, but if the Broncos don't get the run game fixed on offense and the run defense, it sounded like he still was not pleased with that, particularly in the first half.
Yeah.
The Steelers ended up with 141 net rushing yards, but if you look at the first half numbers, they were already at 95. So not a great start there for Denver. That kind of keyed the first Steelers scoring drive, but I think offensively from a run game standpoint, again, Sean Payton said it's not something that changes overnight, but you've really got to focus in on it. You've got to commit resources to it. You've got to be willing to stick with it. Again, if you go 3 and out, right, it's hard to get the run game going because part of it is just like a volume thing. And so
bringing them together.
Yeah, staying on the field helps. You can't have, like the Broncos started the game, right, with a nice run, I thought, with Javonte. Maybe it wasn't the first series. Where was it here? One of these drives, the Broncos had a nice run from Javonte Williams to start the drive, and then you immediately have a negative play.
Yeah.
And, here we go. 1st and 10. First drive of the third quarter. Broncos are only down 10. Javonte Williams, 5-yard gain. And then you have that 4-yarder to Cortland Sutton I mentioned earlier, but boom, illegal formation. Now you're in 2nd and 10.
Yeah.
And so it's just like you've got to find a way to – there are still moments where the run game looks good, but consistently they've got to find a higher gear.
Yeah, and I think to your point about that, Quinn Miners after the game said that was the focus all week, right, was getting the run game going. And he said I was very disappointed that they weren't able to do that this week. And he acknowledged, like, we have to fix this fast. Because if you look at the numbers, Bo Nix was once again your leading rusher, which is not what you want to see from your quarterback. And that was the same story in week 1. After that, you have Javonte Williams, 17 yards, Tyler Beatty, 16 yards, Jaleel McLaughlin, 6 yards. And so it is hard to kind of get those things stringed together so that you can lean on the run, especially when you're going against these defenses. And the tough part about that, too, which was a story in week 1 as well, is the fact that you were facing these 3rd and long situations, 2nd and long situations. And even if you got a big play, you were still behind the 8 ball a little bit. And I think that was one of the things that Sean Payton really focused on, especially when he spoke to the media on Monday, was one of the things he just acknowledged, like, the run game is just not clicking at all. And he's one thing about this team that I'm noticing, especially with the culture change and everything, is accountability. And the accountability is from top to bottom. And I think that also helps guys, like, feel seen and acknowledge, like, okay, like, this needs to work, this needs to shift. And really quick, just touching on the rush defense, Zach Allen after the game told me that it was just a couple plays that got stringed together that they didn't capitalize on. And he acknowledged, like, we're going to fix them. And they're going on the road, back-to-back games. And he said this time together, he feels that they're going to bond. They're going to get what they need to kind of right the ship a little bit. And I think when you have these veteran guys who do feel the losses, they're very upset. Obviously, they don't want to lose, but they're not jumping ship. They're not mad. They're not saying, "Oh, well, this guy didn't do this. This guy didn't do this job." Like, the accountability on this team I feel is what's going to sustain them, because this is a very long season. It's only week 2. There's many, many weeks ahead.
Yeah, totally. And I think one of the things Zach Allen said to you yesterday was it feels different from last year when there were a lot of things structurally that weren't working. There were a lot of big plays being made. Obviously, week 2 against Washington a year ago. The Commanders just catch fire in the second half, end up winning a game that the Broncos should have dominated. Obviously, there was the Miami situation. There was the first half really against Chicago.
Yeah.
This defense was not playing at the level that it's playing at right now. And obviously, you got to keep it going, and you can't rest on your laurels, because if you show up one week and don't play well, the Buccaneers can do that to you, where they put up a bunch of points. So you've got to keep going here. I think it probably helps the defense a little bit that at least, the Broncos weren't quite as, let's see, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 3-and-outs for the Broncos on Sunday against the Steelers, which is not, I don't have the numbers in front of me. It seems like it was less than it was in week 1 in Seattle. So some progress there, some sustained drives that allow the defense to get a little rest. Again, complementary football, play well. So I think this defense is making some strides, and we'll need to continue to play that way. We mentioned the running game on offense, and you mentioned accountability. I think Javonte Williams is one of those guys that he said, hey, we've got to be better there. And Sean Payton was asked about Javonte Williams on Monday, and because you mentioned his output, and 11 carries, 17 yards, a long of 5, average of 1.5. So obviously they need a little bit more from Javonte. Here's what Sean said, quote, I'd say it's probably a collection of all of us. Let's start with design and scheme, and then let's get into some execution. I just finished looking at a play that he gained 3 yards, and it really should be a gain of 7 yards. How are we blocking the backside of this? Do we need to clean that up? He misses a cut or 2 in the game. We need to make sure that we get his eyes where they need to be. In other words, having coached that position before, it's very easy to overcoach. Where's your key? There's usually one defensive player that you're keying on. Then he can predicate or dictate your cut. I saw it in training camp. I look forward to seeing it in the season. In the meantime, some of these other guys are doing a good job. Jaleel McLaughlin is another guy that needs more touches. We talked about Tyler Beatty earlier. You're patient, and yet at some point it starts up front. Obviously, you want to see those runs, end quote. So it's easy to just say, Elisa, like, Javonte's got to be better, or you got to find more success there. But as we mentioned earlier, you can have a 5-yard run, and then you're tackled in the backfield for a 4-yard loss, and now all of a sudden your average, instead of, is it 2.5, it's now half a yard, because your gain is being completely wiped out by that negative play that really isn't on you.
Right.
But still, I think improved play offensively in the run game will help everybody. And certainly you'll need it going on the road. You mentioned the defense and continuing to play well. We've obviously talked about the offense. I'm curious, kind of, as we look ahead to what's next for this team. And you talked about 0-2 teams earlier, but like you said, there wasn't panic necessarily. I think Sean Payton said it Monday that he's seen Bo respond to firestorms. And he said, let me be clear, that's not what we're in now.
Right.
But I do think that, as Sean Payton said Monday, these next 2 games you're going to find out a lot about this team. And it seemed like in the locker room, that's what guys were saying as well post-game.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the guys are kind of focusing on what can be fixed. And speaking of just the entire offense, accountability, things like that, I will say the way that this team is, like you said, there's chatter, around about people not believing in Bo as much anymore, et cetera, X, Y, and Z. Let me tell you. Just
to be clear, we're talking about fans, not
fans,
anybody.
Fans, 100% fans. I said chatter around like fans. Yes, fans. And when I say fans, that's very loosely, mostly just like Twitter people. Like, I'm not even going to give them the title of fans. I'm just Twitter people are tweeting that they don't believe in Nix anymore. He's not who he is. Let me tell you, in this building, in that locker room, the confidence is not shaken from their quarterback. Whether you ask Javonte Williams, whether you ask Quinn Miners, whether you ask Zach Gallen, Pat Surtain, whoever you ask in this locker room, Cortland Sutton, they have all the confidence in Bo and what he is capable of and what they're able to do. Cortland Sutton said after the game, these are the guys that we have, and we feel that we have what we need to win games. And we have a good game plan. We have this. We're just not executing. So like now it's like, I think it's important to acknowledge that, because, everyone always fears like, oh, in the locker room, it's really, no, we're in the locker room. we're there. We're there practice, we're there games. We we're not hanging out, but we're in the locker room waiting to talk to these guys. And their confidence level is not there. PJ Locke said after the game, like, our confidence is not shaken. We understand what happened. We understand the loss. We understand what we need to do better. But, like, we don't feel like we can't do it. We just, we have to do it. And it is easier said than done. But I do like that, Sean Payton acknowledged that and says, like, okay, like, from the coaching side, how do we get our guys in the right spots? And I think that's important.
Yeah, and there's a schematic element to it. There's an execution element to it. There's also the belief element to it, like you mentioned. And Cortland Sutton, I thought after the game spoke, like you said, he spoke
for a long time.
Yeah, and talked about, like, hey, I've been through this, like you mentioned. And I think particularly last year, you can draw on the 1-5 start, and ultimately, from a postseason standpoint, like if you could have gotten a couple of those early, maybe you're in a different position going down the stretch. Maybe you've got a little bit more margin for error. I get all those things. The fact of the matter is you're now 0-2 and kind of shoulda, coulda, wouldas don't matter. You've now got to take this scenario that you're in and find a way to move forward. And last year's experience can help with that, because this was a team that was 1-5 and found a way to rattle off 5 straight wins.
Yeah.
And I get that there are still challenges in trying to do that with a rookie quarterback who is still learning. And I think that you saw some linear progress in my mind from week 1 to week 2, because Bo Nix, I don't know if this is controversial or not. I just thought, like, he was better in basically every way in week 2 than he was in week 1 against a defense that Sean Payton said, frankly, like, is a more veteran, tougher challenge in some ways than Seattle's. Maybe doesn't blitz as much, but excuse me, just he took strides. And I know the interception total was the same there. We've talked about how that last pick, there's not a whole lot you can do on that play. So in some ways, it's like, he had an interception in the end zone, which is similar to Seattle. But then as they're trying to come back from that, he doesn't get baited into throwing another one into triple coverage the way that he did against Seattle. So there were strides there. And so I think, from a passing yardage standpoint, better. There was some, I don't know if it's okay to call this nonsense, Elisa. I think I would call it nonsense.
Nonsense?
I put out a stat that in week 2, Bo had 8 completions of at least 10 yards.
Okay.
In week 1, he had 3 completions. And maybe I should have said chunk plays instead of downfield passes, whatever. But there was this notion from a couple people that are just being difficult on Twitter that, like, that's not
the Twitter
indicative
people
of downfield passing. Well, when you see Cortland Sutton run a dagger in Seattle and Bo overthrows him, and then the next week he comes back and makes that exact same throw and completes it, that's a sign of progress on downfield passes. When you see, if you're able to get a guy the ball in space and it's an 8 or 9 yard throw and he runs for 15, 16, 20 yards, like, to me, that's still indicative of being able to push the ball a little bit down the field. Like, Bo has, I think I saw a stat, he's right up there in the top 10 of, quote, aggressive throws, just there being a small window and him being willing to push the ball in there. So all of that I thought was encouraging. And I think the good thing, again, it was linear progress for me, at least, from week 1 to week 2 in terms of his performance, not necessarily the scoring performance, obviously. It's not always going to be that. There's going to be times where he struggles a little bit, where he maybe takes a step backwards, where he still has some plays that are tough. But the cool thing, maybe cool is the right word, I don't know. When you look at this team, as they move forward, like, you're going to get a better version of Bo
every week
as the season goes along. And so, can these guys keep putting forth their best effort? Can the coaching staff continue to find a way to put them in the best position to make plays, with the understanding that this team is probably going to be, you hope, significantly better in week 5 with Bo leading the way than they are in week 1 or 2. And so then you look at a team that, okay, the Steelers have not had a losing season under Mike Tomlin, right? Like, they're not maybe they're not considered to be Super Bowl contenders right now, but it's a good football team with a really good defense.
Yep.
Went on the road, won its first 2 games. You're right there with that team. You're right there on the road with Seattle, with this offense really just starting to find itself.
Yeah.
4 or 5 weeks from now, if Bo continues to make strides the way we're hoping, now you're looking at a guy that, maybe this team can start to put some stuff together. And again, we mentioned this near the top of the show. Bo said progress doesn't always come with wins, but I think if the progress continues to come, then you're going to see those wins.
The wins come with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, the progress that you're referring to is true. I mean, I was pulling up some stats. So total yards, let's see. We have 295 in Seattle. We have 231 total yards in Seattle, 295 against the Steelers. And then we have total time of possession was a little bit more split. First downs versus Seattle, there was 13 first downs versus 13. So you're trying to kind of find the wins that you can in this offense, right? And so I think with this team in particular, you said it. They're always, and I said it on the podcast last Monday where I said, if you just look at the score, you're not, you didn't watch the game, you're not a fan, you're just, going through the scrolls and you see, 13-6. Wow, the Broncos almost got that one. And again, not in the business of moral victories, but you have to. It's all about context in the sense, like you said, with the run game not going, with Bo still finding his footing, still finding his rhythm, still finding this offense to get clicking. It's nice to see his connection with Josh Reynolds, especially. But when that does start clicking, you see okay, so we're 1 touchdown away from being 2-0, basically. And it's one of those things that you acknowledge, you kind of look at and you look to build off of. You're going into Tampa, and Tampa is 2-0 right now. They just won. They believe they beat the Commanders week 1, and then they got the win yesterday. So, you're going against a tough defense, but you're holding your own against a tough defense in the sense of our defense. The Broncos defense is definitely holding strong against these offenses. Justin Fields is very fast, and they were able to contain him going into the second half. And Geno Smith is a veteran quarterback. They were able to contain him early as well. So you have Baker Mayfield this week, and we know what he's capable of in terms of his arm and his legs. But there is a formula there to contain this quarterback to give your quarterback another shot for a win.
Yeah. And Bo, you mentioned the improvement as a team. Bo's passing yardage was up, yards per attempt, which I know was people were freaking out in week 1 that he averaged 3 yards per attempt.
Twitter people.
And then you looked at Caleb Williams' number, who, as the preseason, and this, again, nothing against Caleb, it just speaks to how difficult it is
to win in this league.
To win in this league, to play as a rookie. People are in the preseason are awed by Caleb Williams because he can do some spectacular things.
Right.
But his yards per attempt was lower than Bo in week 1. This week, Bo's jumps up to 6 something. So that was more impressive.
Yeah. Caleb had 2 interceptions yesterday. Got sacked, like you said, 7 times.
Yeah. So passing totals, yards per attempt, passer rating all went up against the Steelers. And again, they found those opportunities, long drives. I think it goes back to, and it might be, this is just kind of how this league is. Can you not turn the ball over? Can Bo learn from, week 1, that interception in the corner, he is trying to fit a ball in that maybe you can't fit in at the NFL level.
Yeah.
Week 2, I don't know if he didn't see him. I don't know what quite happened there. He said it wasn't a good decision getting picked off there, looking for Sutton. Can he learn from these? And in week 3 against the Bucs, when you have a chance, take advantage of one of them and get in the end zone and give yourself an opportunity there. And listen, it's going to be a heck of a test. You're flying to a place that's in a different time zone. It's an early start. That's always a challenge for, this isn't quite the West Coast, but teams going east, that's always a challenge. You're playing a really good defense. We'll see if Vita Vea plays. The last I saw, kind of a day-to-day situation, I believe dealing with a grade 2 MCL, if I'm remembering correctly. And so obviously that's a see here. Yeah, grade 2 MCL sprain per Todd Bowles. So we'll see kind of what happens there.
Yeah.
But another good defense. I think the key word is patience. And I know that it's not a league where it's easy to be patient. I know it's very difficult to do that, especially as a fan.
Yeah.
But my question, Elisa, is like, we came into this season and people said, hey, there's going to be some ups and downs. We're going to have to figure this out. We're going to, owner and CEO Greg Penner said it really well. There's going to be ups and downs. We're going to be there to support Bo. And again, you mentioned internally that obviously has not changed. But my question is, like, if you're a fan and you were like, we're going to support Bo, we expect some rookie struggles. Well, this is what rookie struggles look like. And this is what,
at this level,
this is what it's like to have a team that is kind of finding its identity. And some guys around Bo probably need to play better. And Sean Payton mentioned that the coaches need to coach better, but it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
And
it's accountability.
I think it's hard when you're in the moment and you want to win these football games.
Yeah. And you could.
And you're close.
And you're close and you could. And you're one play away, you're one stop away, you're one shift away from completely changing the game. I think that's the frustrating part. But
isn't that a good sign that, like, there's still a lot of room for growth? And like, nothing, I don't want to say nothing, but not a lot is going right against the Steelers yesterday. And then you hit a big play and you've got a chance and it feels like the whole tenor of the game changes. And yes, you throw an unfortunate interception, it doesn't work out. But like you mentioned, you're in it despite everything else.
Yeah. You're in it despite everything else against a solid defense, going against a solid coaching staff, defensive staff, all that stuff. And you're able to, again, you're like Sean Payton said, like, Javonte was one cut away from breaking free. Josh Reynolds on the 4th down pass was one tackle away from potentially running into the end zone. I mean, it's just one of those things that if it would just shifted and gone the Broncos' way, you get a touchdown, the crowd gets into it, everyone's hyped, everyone's, that, again, momentum. I feel like the past 2 weeks, what we've learned is the resiliency of this team to not give up despite turnovers or despite struggling on offense, accountability in owning up to your mistakes, whether it's drop passes, whether it's running the wrong route, whether it's whatever it is, owning up to that, and just acknowledging the growth that is there. Like you said, and trust me, it is easier said than done to just be like, oh, it's fine. It's fine. Don't worry. It's fine. Trust me. We get it. We acknowledge it. But it is, it's just like, take a breather. These are the rookie struggles. These are the growing pains of, when you're coming in with younger guys, young and hungry. We said it could be dangerous. Could also just be a learning curve that this team has to kind of build around, get together. And I think with Bo and with the running game, I think it really starts with the running game, and I think getting that going. And we have some good running backs on this team, and they just haven't been able to be unleashed just yet. Yeah,
and now you've got a test, as we've mentioned. It's not just the Bucs; it's this 2-game road trip.
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see how to, Sean Payton mentioned on Monday that he previously had a New Orleans team that started 0-2. They go and they play, I believe he said Carolina, and then they go to London. It ends up being a bonding experience for that group. I believe our great intern, Susanna Weir, looked up that season and said that they went on an 8-game winning streak. Now, obviously, I believe that team had Drew Brees, so that helps, right? But
a little bit.
But I'll just be interested to see kind of what these next 2 weeks are about. And, like, can you find a little bit more success? Can you find a way to get a win? Sean Payton mentioned it. Like, it's not make or break here over the next 2 weeks because it's a long season. But certainly you find out, like, what is this team all about? Do you respond to a tough loss to the Steelers by going and putting in a really competitive performance against a good Tampa team? Mm-hmm. Do you find a way to take, Sean Payton said the Broncos are going to spend the week on the East Coast after that game in Tampa. Like, do you find a way to take that and go to New York and obviously that's a game that we'll get to in a couple weeks. But Aaron Rodgers, they found their rhythm a little bit on Sunday against the Tennessee Titans. Can you go play good defense and continue to make strides there? And I almost look at it, and it all like it's a team game, right? And that's important. Everyone needs to play well around Bo Nix. The defense needs to continue to play well.
Yeah.
It was nice to see guys like Jonah Ellis get his first career sack. Shout out to him.
And a big moment too.
Yep. Zach Allen played out of his mind. I know you've mentioned several times talking to him, but he 4 quarterback hits. I believe he's tied for 4th in the league right now in quarterback hits. So a lot of guys around Bo Nix that are obviously important to this team's success. We'll see how guys like, as we're recording this, no updates yet on Baron Browning, Mike McGlinchey, who exited due to injury. John Franklin Myers ruled out with a concussion. We'll see kind of what his status is for this week. But all that aside with Bo, I almost wonder if this first 4 weeks is like, baseball players, you're baseball expert. They go up there and they've got the donut on the bat, right?
Yeah.
And they're warming up, and it's harder to swing with the donut on the bat. Yeah. And then you take the donut off, and all of a sudden, a little easier to swing. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if these first 4 weeks are almost like that donut that you're going against Mike McDonald and Mike Tomlin, who, by the way, has the best record against a rookie quarterback since, I believe, 2000. I think it's the 3rd best all time. And so this is a guy that's always posed a challenge. We knew this was going to be a difficult game. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, it's okay to be upset. And, I left the stadium yesterday feeling like, man, I wish they could have gotten that one.
Yeah.
And then you wake up, you watch the film, if you're the coaching staff and the players, and you get back after it and you find a way to keep moving forward, to attack the next challenge and kind of go from there.
Yeah, and the guys acknowledged, losing at home is not what they want. They have a really high winning percentage at home. They have, obviously, Broncos country shows up loud and strong every game. And, like you said, they're on the road for 2 weeks. Week 3 is Tampa Bay in Tampa. Then there's week 4 in New York versus the Jets. And then they return home October 6th. So it's a little bit away for them to return home. And I feel like even that, for a rookie to have 3 road games in the first month, I feel like that's also something that to acknowledge as well. There's 3 road games, tough defenses, and the one game you had at home was against another tough defense. So it to your point, the 4 weeks could easily be like that holder on the back of the bat. Alex Singleton mentioned it, let's wait to see where we are when we come back, because I do think that they believe as well, yes, it always comes down to a couple of those plays. And I think that looking at this defense, they were able to, like you said, it was a tale of 2 halves. They would just flip this time. They didn't start as fast, but then the second half, they were really, really able to lock in. And week 1, it was the opposite effect. So I think trying to get those things, and when I talked to Zach Allen after the game, I said, you had a great game, and I know that it's a team sport, but how do you let your performance become infectious to the rest of the team? And he just talked about realizing this defense is elite when they play their way, and when they try to play differently, that's where some mistakes happen, or they can't string certain defensive drives together. But he's like, we have what it takes to do it, because every guy is going to step up every Sunday in that way.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see kind of what this team is all about. We've mentioned it several times now. This is a chance to grow, a chance to learn from something, and really get things going. And it starts right now with looking ahead toward Tampa Bay, and so we'll have plenty of coverage all week as we get ready for a big road trip. But it's just I know it's difficult as a fan. It's difficult for us because it's not baseball, it's not basketball where you go play a game the next day. You only get one opportunity a week, and then you talk about it all week, you think about it all week until you get that chance to get kind of that sour taste out of your mouth the next week. So
any given Sunday, anything can happen any given Sunday.
That's right. And see what the Broncos can do this week in Tampa. We'll have a lot more coming up here, right?
Yeah, well, we're going to have another pod, obviously, on Thursday. We'll preview for that game. We'll get ready for the this big road trip. We'll really dive deep into that Tampa matchup with Baker and Todd Bowles and like that entire defense scheme that they have there. And, we're going to talk to the guys during the week, and we'll get a good sense of kind of where they're at and kind of what they're kind of focusing on. Again, like I think, so you guys know Broncos country. It is difficult for us too because we see the work put into practice. Like you guys aren't here, we're your eyes here, but we see the work put into practice. We see the focus, we see the seriousness, we see that these guys are giving it their all. So we're here with you, but we got you covered. We broke down the numbers. We appreciate you attending the math class edition of Altitude Advantage. Once again, I am your team reporter, Elisa Hernandez. This is our lead writer, Aric DiLalla. Hopefully I said that right. Aric?
We're close enough.
Maybe next time. Well, thanks you guys for joining us. Make sure you guys tune in for the next episode.